Hi, I'm Victoria.
Hi, I'm Olivia.
Hi, I'm Sayla.
Hi, I'm Sammy. Good to see everyone. It's a real blessing to be here with you guys, and this is just home for us. And thank you guys, worship team, and everyone who does this for us, and just the freedom we have here to worship with the Lord. She likes the microphone. JoJo's our social one. She wanted to be back with the kids again. And so again, thank you, workers in the kid room. Just want to echo that because I was that mom who did not want to be in there, who did not want to volunteer my time. Sunday was my time to check out, be in worship, and not help in the kids room. And now we're on the mission field where when we're in the jungle, we're running Sunday school and spending every Sunday with the kids. Which is a big blessing, and it's, you get more back than you're giving, really.
That's right.
So this is your home, and we say your ministry starts in your home. And so being able to serve your family and do that here will give you the capacity to go outside these walls and serve your community, serve your town, serve the nations. So just bless you with that.
Amen.
Hi everyone, my name is Podu. I am Korean ethnic. I'm from Korean state Burma. And then happy to see you all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Sammy just said you should tell the deer story. So Podu just got here a few days ago. It's actually a miracle that he's even here. It's amazing because he's part of an ethnic group that is a stateless community. They don't have passports. They don't have a way to leave their country. But through God and amazing processes and the U.S., God bless America, he's able to be here. And so we were driving from New York, which he flew into New York, of all places. He flew into New York. We're driving from New York to here, and I said, he loves to hunt. So I said, oh, Podu, look at the deer out in that field. And he goes, you mean the horses? I said, no, those are deer. They're big here because they have small barking deer in the jungle. He's like, I only see 3 horses. There's no horses out there, those are just deer. And so, it's cool. Hopefully he'll get a chance to do some hunting and fishing while he's here in America. But, actually, I was a bit like, I didn't want to go to New York. I'm not a huge tourist trap fan. And because that's where it worked out for Podu to fly into, I'd never been there, Sammy had never been there. We're like, all right, we're going to New York, set a time limit on it. We have 36 hours there, and we're going to see everything. And so we did, and my heart was moved because I thought, I just looked at it from a commercialization perspective and not from a historical perspective. But when we were on this boat tour, seeing the Statue of Liberty, they were explaining the history of that island. And I don't know if any of you guys know, or some of you guys know, but they used to call that island the Island of Tears. Because when America was first founded, that's where all the immigrants would come and try to receive citizenship and try to become American citizens. And they turned away millions of people because they were sick or they didn't have jobs. America was not able to sustain or to benefit from having poor immigrants come or someone who had a disease or sickness. And then you look at it now, and you look at all the ethnic groups and all what America has become. It's the exact opposite of that. It's actually leading the world in inviting immigrants in and allowing people to come in and make a home here. And everywhere we go all over the world, when we meet refugees and IDPs, they always want to come to America, and that's what it's become. And so it's just this rich history. It was kind of a blessing for me. God had that gift for us in there to learn the history of our country and the history of where we come from and the gift that America can be to the nations. And so I just a little side note there. So there's going to be these pictures playing behind me. My wife and I had a little bit of a debate of whether it would be distracting or not. And so while I tell the history of FBR and kind of our story, how we got involved, they're going to be playing back there. I'm not going to look, because if I look, then I'm going to tell the story behind the picture, and we're going to be here all day. What time is this one over?
12:50 latest.
12 what?
12:45.
12:45. All right. Sounds good. Okay. So, how many of you guys know where Burma is? How many of you have heard of the civil war that's in Burma? Yeah, so not a lot of people. So that was like Sammy and I, 5 years ago when we found out about this. We had no idea. We'd never even heard of it. There's been a civil war in Burma for 75 years, since World War II. The ethnic minority groups, there's over 130 ethnic minority groups, speak a different language, have a different religion, have different cultures, all in Burma that have been fighting for independence, and democracy from their government, from the Burmese government. Pre-World War II, the British occupied Burma, and they primarily worked and did commerce in the ethnic minority groups. And during World War II, when the Japanese invaded, Britain left. And then after World War II, when the Japanese were defeated, they came back for a couple years and then were quickly kicked out by the Burmese government. And that's when the dictatorship and the oppressive government regime started against the ethnic people. And so because the ethnic minorities had experienced what democracy looked like, they'd experienced the fruits and the benefits of that, they stood up against the Burmese government and said, this is something worth fighting for, and they fought the government for 75 years for those reasons. And so that kind of brings, that's a longer war than most of us have been alive. And so it's easy to kind of forget about. It's just been going on for so long that a lot of people stop talking about it, or a lot of people just aren't aware of what's going on. But part of the reason that Podu is here today is because of what FBR does. He's been a part of the history of FBR in 1997, Podu? 97. So Podu was 2 years old. His mom was fleeing from the Burma army. They had just destroyed their village, and they're capturing and killing anybody that they came across. And Podu was 2 years old. He's on his mom's back. She's pregnant with his younger brother, and his dad, who's a medic for the local militia, was helping people on the front lines. And that's been Podu's life. In his early childhood and growing up even to his young adult life has been running away from the Burma army, who's been oppressing the Karen people. And in that 97-98 offensive, Dave Eubank had gone over to Thailand. He had been grown up as a missionary kid in Thailand, and then went back after his career in the military. And he had heard about this huge offensive that was happening, and he said, well, I'm going to bring a backpack of medicine, and I'm going to help one person, and they're going to be happy, and I'll be happy, and if that happens, then it's a successful mission. And so on his way in, he met Podu's dad, Ilya, and he had that backpack of medicine, and it was just a God-ordained connection. So they were able to go right to the front lines and help over 1,000 people in that week with that backpack of medicine. So Dave said, this has to continue, it has to go on. And so over the last 35 years, he's built this ministry based on the helping the people and getting the news out. And so he'll bring, and it started out just bringing a backpack of medicine, and then it was a truckload of medicine, and then it was the ethnic leaders saying, hey, can you train our guys how to be medics and how to report on this humanitarian crisis that's happening? And so we have over 115 5 to 10 man ethnic teams. They live in Burma, they volunteer to do it, they're not paid, they work 24/7 reporting on the humanitarian crisis and treating sick and injured patients all over Burma, all year long. And so that's the organization that Dave created, and that's the organization that we're part of. It's called the Free Burma Rangers. There are a few other Western missionaries that come from America that are a part of it. There's about 6 families, our family included. And we're all volunteers for the organization. We just believe that God led us to that organization to be with the people of Burma. And then we also work in Iraq and Syria, and then a little bit in Tajikistan during the Afghan crisis, trying to help Afghan refugees when America pulled out. And so throughout the history of the Civil War, there's been a few ceasefire agreements. That just means that the ethnic groups decided, okay, we're going to stop fighting the Burmese government so that we can do commerce or try to get along or try to figure out our political indifferences. It has never lasted. It's never gone more than a couple of years. And then about 8 years ago, there was one of the largest ceasefire agreements that happened where the Burmese government said, okay, we're going to let you form a democracy. you can have elected members of Congress and Parliament, or whatever they wanted to call it, their ministries, and we'll let you do that, but we're going to continue to run the country as far as the military goes. And so for about 8 years, they formed a democracy, and it was going really well. They had selected the lady to run it. Her name is Aung San Suu Kyi, and she was chosen to run it because she was half Burman, and then her mother was Karen ethnic. And so they thought, oh, she's the perfect person to unite these ethnic groups. And it was going so well that the dictatorship saw that it was ruining their authority. And so in 2021, February, they did another military coup where they arrested and executed over 100 of their political leaders and said, you can no longer have a democracy, the ceasefire is over, we're going to control this country. In '98, when they did that, it took them 3 months to control and occupy the entire country. And all of it, the majority of the ethnic minorities were slaughtered, killed, or pushed into refugee camps into Thailand, and that's what Bodu's life was a part of. This time when it happened, because of that 8-year period, there was a big population of the civilian students, the doctors, they call it the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, that said, we disagree with what you're doing, we actually want them to have a democracy, and so they began to protest in the streets against their government. And they just were holding signs or walking down the streets trying to petition to allow the government to let them set back up their democracy. The government didn't like that. They began to execute those protesters in the streets. Machine guns, grenades, RPGs. It was an extremely bloody battle in the streets of the cities with all these civilians saying we disagree. And what that did is it really showed the cards of the Burma army, the Burma government. And the people, instead of running in fear and becoming complicit in it and going, okay, we give up, you do your thing, they actually joined these resistance groups, the ethnic minority militias and groups that have been fighting the Burma army for 75 years. They said, no, we want to stand with you and we want to support you in however we can. And so it's been this big shift over the last 3 years where you've primarily had a big divide between all these ethnic minorities and Burmans. You know, we look at Burma and we go, oh, everybody there is a Burman. But those ethnic minorities don't consider themselves Burman. It's very offensive, actually, if you say, oh, you're Burman. They don't speak the language, they don't believe the same political policies. And so what happened in that coup is it began to shift the perspective of these Burmans and shift the perspective of this ethnics who said, oh, we want to fight this government because we want freedom, we want freedom from oppression of what the government was doing to the people.
Yeah.
And so you had all of these doctors and teachers and civilians running into the jungle and asking these ethnics for help, going, we need to find a safe place and we need to hide with you. And the ethnics going, we don't really trust you. We've been fighting you our whole lives. Who are you? You don't even know what your government has done. They're very against the idea of helping Burmans in the beginning of the war and the beginning of the coup. And I was sitting in a meeting with Dave and a couple other top leaders of these ethnic minority groups, and they said, we have literally thousands of young people running to us, asking for us to help them. And these are people that we've been fighting for 75 years that don't align with us, that have been empathetic to the Burmese resistance. What do we do? And we happen to be in that meeting. And we're like, wow, okay, help them. You need them. You need to unite. This is what your country needs. And so we were able to pray with those top leaders, and they said, okay, we can't do anything about it. We're not going to do anything, but can you train them and teach them how to go back into the cities and provide medical aid and support the city Burmese-run areas where the ethnics have no access to. And so we did a training, the very first one, in 2021, and we had 200 students who had just fled the city, and either their education was put on hold or their life in the city, their normal day-to-day life was put on hold because of this coup. And so they were super desperate for whatever we had. We could have, taught them the alphabet and they would have been happy. But we taught them medical skills, we taught them how to report on the humanitarian crisis, and we taught them how to properly document war crimes, and just really to help the people. And along with that, we also presented the gospel every single day to them. And in that first group of 200 refugees, really, we had over 90% of them give their lives to the Lord. And believers, and they went back to their cities, and they became some of like our top, like they were reporting on stuff, and they were helping the people, getting the news out. They were doing a stand-up job. And all of a sudden, the ethnics who had all this hardness in their heart towards them, they went, oh, we need these people. And so they said, can you help train the rest of them? And so over the process of the last 3 years, we've trained over 10,000 of these students who are running away, and they're joining. And we've had a similar response of them wanting to follow Jesus because they're in the worst time of their life. And one of the stories that sticks out to me when we went into the jungle, we go as a family, and it's always kind of a treacherous journey. We walk and take boats and carry everything on our backs. It looks a little bit different every time we go in. But one of the times, one of the times we went in, Joanna, she was like 4 years old at the time, and we have to walk at midnight, and it's dark, and we're walking around the Burma army camp, so we have to be quiet, and it starts to rain, and the ground is slippery and wet. She falls, hits her head, splits her head open, and I was just angry. Initially I'm angry. I'm going, okay, I'm a terrible father. What have I done? Why are my kids here? This is selfish of me. But Jojo gets up, she has a great attitude, she finishes the walk, she's a big goose egg, and we patch her head up. The next day we met all of these Burmans who had defected. They were police officers who had defected and said, we no longer want to stand with our government, we want to join this resistance, can you help us? And so we spent the next week training them and just ministering to them and praying for them and telling them about Jesus. And at the end of that, training, 62 of them out of the 64 gave their life to Jesus. And we're on our way out. And Jojo, in her mind, she knows we have to do the same trip out. So she was like, Dad, I'm kind of scared. I don't want to do this trip out. And I said, I'm scared too. We're just going to pray, and everything's going to be okay. We're going to be okay. God led us here. And we got on these motorbikes, and there's like a steep cliff on one side and jungle on the other side, and the motorcycle almost goes off a couple times, and she's just holding on to me going, Dad, I'm really scared. And so I was just praying. You know, Sammy was in front of me on a motorcycle with Selah. They're not really motorcycles, they're like mopeds. They don't belong in the jungle. But that's all they got. And so Jojo holds on to me, and a few minutes later, she was just dead asleep on the motorcycle. And some of you have heard this story, but I just felt the Lord say, this is how I was able to sleep in the boat. It's because I trusted who my father was, and Jojo trusts her father. And it's actually her faithfulness that led those people to me. It's actually her faithfulness to the mission. You know, every time we go in, we pray as a family. Girls, is this what God's calling you to do? And all of them say, yeah, okay, this is what we're doing.
Wow.
And so I believe that it was her faithfulness that actually led many of those students to choose to follow Christ. And so we have this opportunity all the time to lead our kids. Okay, I have to tell this story. You should just pause those. Okay, so I'm going to tell that story because it's a good one, and I have time. So we're going into mission as a family during rainy season. So rainy season, all the rivers flood. Access becomes incredibly hard. You have to cross these raging rivers, either by a raft or a bamboo, bridge that they build, or in this case, we had a rope. And so we come up on this river, and it's raging, and the ethnic group that brought us, they're like, you need to get to the other side of the river, and here's a rope. And I was like, okay, great. I've done this a bunch of times in my military career. I can build a rope bridge. So I swim across the river. I tie the rope on the other side. They're like, we're not coming with you. You have to get your whole family across, and we'll send some guys to meet you on the other side. It's like, okay, we're going. So we prayed about it, and I crossed the river, Selah holding onto my back. I'm shimmying across this river, and all the girls eventually cross, and we get on the other side, and that commander who's holding Selah, he's one of the commanders of the local area. Tukler is his name, and he's known Podu since he was an infant. He comes into the river, he steps in, gets his boots wet, and he picks up Selah, this huge smile on his face, and he said, the Karen kids would never do this. It's so dangerous. What are you doing? And he said, well, we love you. And Jesus brought us here for you. And he just had this huge smile on his face. And you could tell in that moment, he was like, I'll bring you anywhere. You can come anywhere with me. And so it was just this level of trust that we had in that moment. And he's like, you're going to let your 3-year-old kid, swim across this river? And I had a contingency plan in my head. It wasn't as dangerous as it sounds, in my mind. A lot of times I look back and go, that was crazy. But in the moment, this is what we're doing. And I think it's God's grace that covers us. And
Come on.
But I thought, okay, if the rope breaks, we're going to end up in this section of the river. And I didn't find out until afterwards that section of the river went right into a Burma army camp. And so I was like, well, fortunately the rope didn't break. We made it across. And, what you don't know doesn't scare you until afterwards. And so, God's in that same mission, we continue walking and get to a remote clinic that we support that Ilya's family, or Podu's family runs. Ilya is his dad, Ilya and Kat. They built this clinic in the middle of the jungle. It services 11 villages that are within 3 hours of walking distance. It's the closest medical facility that any of them have. And most of them have to walk to get there. During dry season, you can take a motorbike or a vehicle. Access is a little bit easier, but it's still a very challenging life. But they have this clinic, kind of in the middle of nowhere. And so we were on our way to that clinic, and there's babies being born all the time. It's something that has happened during since the military coup, is that the Burmese government carries out airstrikes, and their targets are clinics, hospitals, and schools primarily. And so those are the 3 places, and churches. Those are like the places where we pretty much spend most of our time. And so we've had a lot of airplanes bombing in and around us. And so we just carry out the mission. And the girls know, when the airplane comes, you jump in the trench, or when the airplane's flying overhead, you sleep in the jungle, you don't sleep in the building. And so one night, there's Selah. When the first couple times when you land, either when you get back to Thailand or you get back to America, and an airplane flies over, you have that initial reaction of like, oh no, this is a bad feeling. But in Burma, every airplane that flies over carries munitions and is there to hunt you down and kill you. They're there to destroy the population. And so you live kind of with this constant fear of what could happen. And it can really dictate your actions. It can really, if you allow it can mold and form your decisions, and it can tell you what to do. And so you constantly are dealing with that. And I don't know why I was going on that tangent, but I should go off my notes. I did better on the first service. Sammy said you have more time during this one, so I'm letting it roll a little bit more. But I don't really have more time, that was just a lie. And so we're at this clinic, I get a call, I hear a horn beeping, and a father comes, and through translation, he goes, my daughter is here, she has a stomach ache. I said, okay. Go help her. So we go over to the clinic, and I realized that the stomach ache is she's 9 months pregnant and she's in labor. So it's a loose translation. It's like a message. And so we're like, I look at the father to be, and I said, this is your first baby. You're going to be a father tonight. Congratulations. And so we're delivering this baby, and we hear a jet flying low over the clinic on a bombing run, because there's a difference when they're flying high and looking. And when they come in on a bombing run, you can hear the afterburners. Actually, if you live in Ocean Beach or Oceana, you hear that sound. It's not a good sound. There's stickers here that say "I heart jet noise." I disagree. Anyway, we heard this jet coming, and we just prayed. We can't do anything. She's in the middle of giving birth, and we can't run, we can't hide. And so we had everybody else who wasn't assisting with the delivery go get in the trench, and fortunately for us, it was bombing another location. So it didn't bomb that night, and we just praise God and thank the Lord that wasn't us. And that particular bombing site, we went to report on everything, at all the airplanes and military attacks that happened. one of our jobs is to go and report on what is happening. And so we went and reported on this church that had been hit by an airstrike. And a couple days later, we found out that that there's a group of surgeons in there. And so they live inside of a cave system. And like I said, during the coup, there was all these civilian doctors and surgeons and teachers that fled into the jungle and decided to do this civil disobedience where they no longer stood for what the government was doing, and they began to help the people. And so it's this unity, it's this tie that we've never seen in Burma in the history of the Civil War. And so I had heard rumors of this group of surgeons, and I was like, I want to meet these guys. I want to know what they're capable of, what they can do, where they're at, who are they. They were just kind of this mysterious group. And over the next couple of days, I heard a little bit more, and we ended up crossing paths, driving down a road. They said, hey, there's two of the surgeons who lead that surgeon group. So I jumped out of the car, and I said, hey, I've been waiting to meet you. They said, we've been waiting to meet you. Where is your clinic? What do you know, we were able to share what we were capable of and what they were capable of. And in our brief conversation, I just said, what's the most common case you see? What's the most common surgical case you see? And they said, actually, it's C-sections. We've done over 300 C-sections since the beginning of the coup. We do it all the time. And it turns out that war doesn't keep people from making babies, which is great. And so that was in the back of my mind, and I just thought, wow, so awesome to meet you. Thank you for what you're doing. What they're doing is, if you could really understand how deep and how rooted the ethnic divide is, seeing them join the resistance, join this fight, and stand with the people, stand with these ethnic minorities is huge. It's really Jesus. It's really God saying, no, this is enough. And so a couple days later, I was on a run. I run into the clinic. All the medics come running out and say, Thra, you need to come in here. Thra is what they call the white people, which just means teacher. And so, Thra, you need to come in and help this lady. So I go in, and she's uncontrollably bleeding, and she's in the middle of a complicated labor. And so we find out that she had been bleeding for about 8 hours. It took her 3 hours to get there. She was extremely pale. She was very deep into shock at that moment. And I just said, we need to get her to this surgeon group. They can help. And Podu's mom, at the time, she didn't know their capabilities. She said, no, they can't do C-sections. They can't do birth complications. We have to go to Umpam, which is 6 hours away. And I said, no, I just talked to them. I just met them on the road, and they said that they do C-sections all the time. And she said, really? Okay, yeah, then go there. And so we load her up, and we're just trying to stabilize her at this point. And actually the complications, so they have very traditional old school medicine, and the complication came from her being past her due date, and they have midwives, they call them, in the village that do traditional medicine. And if you go past your due date, they think the baby needs to come out right away. And so she was actually standing on her stomach with a board, pushing the baby out. That's how they were trying to deliver the baby, because they don't have the education, the modern medicine. They thought they were doing the best thing for the mother, and it ended up separating the placenta. And so she's bleeding, internally bleeding uncontrollably. And so we rush over the mountain, dirt, 4-wheel drive roads. It's like really not a great place to be in the back of a truck if you're bleeding and trying to deliver a baby. But we get to this bombing site, which is what they said, okay, get here and then we'll find you. And I see in the distance, sitting behind the table, I see Dr. Samuel is his name. And I just said, Samuel, we need your help right now. And he stands up and he looks at this Karen woman, and he could see, he's a surgeon, he's been doing this his whole life. He could see right away. He immediately got nurses and medics on her. They began a blood transfusion. They figured out her blood type, and then they called the PDF, which is the People's Defense Force. They're all Burmans who have joined this resistance. And they called and said, who has this, on the radio they called and said, who has this blood type? And 2 young guys come out of the jungle smiling, ready to give blood. They're hooked up to blood. Wow. They have this blood transfusion going on the mom. And I'm just watching all of this kind of amazed, going, in the beginning, nobody trusted these guys. We thought, oh, this isn't real. They're not actually in this with us. But here you have 2 guys giving their blood to this pregnant this mother who's trying to deliver. She's Korean, they're Burman. She has Burman blood now going into her body, which is saving her life.
Wow.
You have these Burman surgeons who are living in a cave. They gave up their salaries, they gave up their life, they gave up everything that they had in the city, and still could have. You know, this was a choice that they could live in the cities and kind of ignore what's going on politically and still do that. But they chose, no, we're going to stand for freedom and we're going to help these people. So watching all these surgeons come around this Korean woman, and the doctor looked at me and he said, we're just trying to save the mom at this point. The baby's not had oxygen, not had blood flow for the last 8 hours. We don't see life on the ultrasound, so we're just trying to save the mom. And so then this, very Burmese jungle-looking guy comes out of the woodwork in a wife beater. You could tell he'd just been woken up. He has what they call betel nut in his mouth. It's like, they chew it like tobacco, but it's like a really hard nut, and it dyes your mouth red. All of them chew it, even the little kids. And he's chewing this, and I was like, who's this guy? And the doctor goes, that's our C-section guy. He's the C-section surgeon. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Okay, so they get in there, incredibly professional, they sterilize as best they can. They perform this C-section to the standard of any American C-section. I've witnessed them in ERs here in America, and it was done the same. It was just amazing to watch. They pull this lifeless baby out. He hands it to a neonate surgeon who had also joined the resistance. I'm like, you have a neonate surgeon?
Wow.
What in the world? You have capabilities here that we don't even have in the American Special Operations. It's awesome.
Right.
And so they hand that baby, they're resuscitating the mother. The mother begins to become stable. About 45 minutes later, we hear a cry from the baby. And the doctor just looked at me. We were praying the whole time, like, God save this baby. And he looked at me and he said, you saved these 2 lives tonight. And I was just like, no, you saved these 2 lives. I just drove here terrified that they're going to die. And, just the humility that he had. And so that was the beginning of our relationship. And we've since brought hundreds of patients there. We bring patients all the time.
Yeah.
They have an amazing capability. They can do, orthopedic and broken bones and all kinds of stuff that you can't even imagine inside of a cave. They're doing this. And so I just thought, wow, this is really what reconciliation looks like. This is what they need. They have to believe that they can work together and that they need each other.
Wow.
And because of that, we get to visit the soldiers and the traumatic injuries that are in that clinic, and be able to encourage them and just let them know that they're loved. And I'll kind of skip across now. So that's what's happening in Burma. That's the reconciliation battle that they have. They have many different people groups that are trying to come together. You're trying to look across racial, religious, financial, all these divides, and go, no, we believe in unity. We believe in working together, and we'll do that. And so that's happening in Burma, and we get to be intimately a part of it, and I'm so thankful for it every time that we're there. Even though I get scared a lot there, it's very easy to get terrified and go, God, is this really where you brought me? Is this really where you have me? And I'm just reminded every time I have little faith or I have doubt, God's always there to go, this is why you're here. Nobody else has the opportunity to be here to tell them about Jesus in this moment of crisis. And so afterwards, when I'm done being afraid and being weak in my faith, God's always there going, no, this is where I have you for this moment. And so I'm just so thankful for that. And I want to transition now. Okay, the slides are done. That's good. Kind of into what the Lord's been putting on my heart as far as reconciliation. And did you say 12:50?
Yeah.
It's 12:50. All right, see you guys.
Good.
Yeah, no, it's just the importance of reconciliation. And we had the opportunity recently, about a year and a half ago, to meet with a woman who had been trafficked by ISIS. She was a Yazidi woman, and the Yazidi people were slaughtered. The men were executed by ISIS. It's what turned the world against ISIS, really, is when they saw, okay, ISIS is bad. We can't. She's so distracting. Didn't you hear Matt's message about going in the... It's always the PKs that are the worst. They think they get a hall pass. Anyways, we had the chance to meet this woman shortly before going into Syria on a relief mission. And she had been trafficked for 8 years, sold as a sex slave by ISIS, beaten, abused, witnessed humanitarian war crimes that you can't even imagine, the things that she saw, the things that she was placed in by ISIS, by these men who believe that they're following God. And they believe they're justified in doing these actions. And when we were interviewing her and her story, we were all just heartbroken at humanity and how a human could do such a thing to anyone. And the next day we were on trucks headed into Syria to do this relief mission, and we ended up down in Deir ez-Zor, which is where ISIS still exists. There's still sleeper cells, ISIS down there. There are many of the caliphate leaders ran away and are in Deir ez-Zor, and we were like, well, we're going to go under the umbrella of humanitarian aid. We want to go and help their women and children and help the refugees there. And so in order to do that, we had to get permission from the village tribe leaders. And so we found ourselves in a meeting. We walked into this room. We didn't really know it was going to happen. But there was 100 ISIS leaders in that room. And in my mind, I was thinking of all of the evil things that they've done to this Yazidi girl and thousands of Yazidi women and thousands of people. The things that they've done, and I began to get really, really angry, began to have hate in my heart, and began to think, they all just need to die. They don't deserve Jesus. And in that moment, we only had a brief couple of moments there. Dave, the leader of the organization, I thought, I hope he doesn't start talking about Jesus, because these guys do not deserve Jesus. And I remember thinking that distinctly in my heart, because I was so angry at the things that they had done. And a couple seconds go by and he's talking about Jesus. And I'm like, what are you doing? They don't deserve Jesus. And I felt the Lord in that moment say, do you really think that you're better than they are? You have to forgive them for what they've done. And I didn't want to do that. And I chewed on that, and the next day we were serving their kids, doing a small Good Life program or doing a skit about the Bible and teaching them about Jesus and handing out bracelets and shirts and just spending time with their kids. And those same leaders invited us into their home, and we're having dinner with them that night. And still, I was like, really? Why are we here? These guys do not deserve this. And I just had so much bitterness in my heart, and the Lord began to speak to me about what it looks like to be reconciled to Christ. And as he was, I heard the Lord say, do you think you're better than them? And if I were to answer that honestly, I would say, yeah, I do. But if I actually look in that moment, I thought, yes, I am better than them. But if I look at my past, if I look at my history, if I look at the things that I've done, I am no better. I'm no better than them. I'm no less deserving of God's grace than they are. And so I started to look to the Bible for answers. And is Sammy in here? She was going to read this. I have like this, an earache right now that I woke up with, and it's making my vision kind of blurred. It's gotten a little bit better, but it's challenging to read. But I'll read.
I got you.
You want to read it? All right. Matt's going to read. So, 2 Corinthians 5.
For Christ's love compels us, because we are convinced that one died for all, and therefore all died. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. So from now on, we regard no one from a worldly point of view. Though we once regarded Christ in this way, we do so no longer. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old is gone, the new is here.
Yeah, so we read that and go, oh, my job, once I've decided to follow Jesus, is no longer to view people through Blake's eyes, no longer to view people through judgment and through condemnation and through the way that I see them and through pride and arrogance and all these things that I have a twisted perspective. It's actually to view them the way Christ sees them.
Wow.
It says that Christ's love compels us and that he died for all.
Yeah.
It means that he was hanging up on the cross. He was hanging up on the cross for those ISIS men going, would you choose me?
Yes.
And I didn't want to accept that because of my own pride and my own anger and bitterness. And if you keep reading, you know, the Bible's full of lessons that hurt. It's like a sword, you know, the Bible, it hurts you on the way in.
Yes.
You're getting stabbed by the word. But it's good, you know, it transforms us. It's really what gives us freedom.
Yeah.
And so in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus talks about loving your enemy. You can't get any more clear, love your enemy. In Matthew chapter 6, when Jesus is talking about the Lord's Prayer, here he is teaching us how to pray. You know, the disciples, they didn't say, teach us how to walk on water. Teach us how to do these. They said, can you teach us how to pray? Because they recognized that the source of Jesus' power was through his prayer life.
Yeah.
And so after Jesus teaches us how to pray, he says, in the following verse, it says, forgive or you're not forgiven. That's a paraphrase. That's the blank translation. Forgive or you're not forgiven. And then in Mark chapter 12, when Jesus is talking about have faith in God, have faith to move mountains, prayer, you know, faith-filled prayers that will actually move mountains. When you do that, it's following in verse 25. That's Mark 11:22, and then in verse 25 it says, when you stand praying. So it's prefaced, remember, he's talking about faith to move mountains. And then he follows it saying, when you stand praying, if you hold anything against anyone, forgive them, so you may be forgiven.
Wow.
And that hurts. And in worship today, I thought, reconciliation is painful. And reconciliation actually looks like Jesus hanging on a cross, becoming unrecognizable as a man, so that we can be reconciled. And he was hanging on the cross, not waiting for us to say, will you forgive me? He's doing it before all of that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Come on.
And so when I'm standing before all these ISIS men and I'm having this hate in my heart, I have to forgive them before they go, oh my goodness, I'm wrong. That's my job as a believer in Jesus, because he gives us the gift of reconciliation. It says after that he's given us the ministry of reconciliation, which just means forgiving someone else's trespasses.
Yeah.
And so in Corinthians chapter 2, it also says that we're ambassadors. It means we are the image of Christ. We are Christ in that moment. We have the ability to be Christ everywhere we go. And the final note that I had in worship, I'll close with this, is, oh, maybe I already said it, yeah, reconciliation is painful. It looks like hanging on a cross for the people who hung you there. And so, you know, those ISIS men, many of them killed and tortured Christians. They killed and tortured Americans just for their beliefs. And it doesn't matter what they're going to do or the way that they believe. Jesus died for them. And so it's this idea of reconciliation that we have. And as I come to America, it's always challenging to go, how do we bring our life, how do we bring our experiences and our stories to you all, to the American church, who really sends us there, who's with us on the front lines in prayer and support. How do we do that? And I feel like as we look at the church, as we look at our own lives, we are fighting a civil war.
Yeah.
And there's this gift of reconciliation that Jesus gives us that can bring together denominations, it can bring together differences of opinion, it can bring together differences of race.
Come on.
And it's not about any of that, it's about Jesus reconciling us to him.
Good.
And so I'll finish with that. It's 10 minutes. That story, that's good. That's a record time. Thank you for sitting here and listening to these stories. And thank you, Matt, and all of the leadership for giving us this time to share with you. It's really special to be here. It's a gift. And for those of you that don't know and don't see churches all over the world, you guys are really, really lucky to have a big house and the worship and the leadership that's here is special. So it's a gift every time we get to come and be here and share our life with you. So thank you.
I love you guys.